In this video, you're going to be looking at understanding production area questions within the National 5 written exam. Now, before we start, it's really important to understand exactly what are production areas. Now, production areas are all the theatrical effects that are layered on top of a performance to enhance the performance. Now, these would include lighting, sound, costume, set design, hair and makeup, and props. Now, it's really important that you have a knowledge and understanding of all these different kinds of theatrical effects because you're going to be asked about them in the written exam. You'll have to understand the different kinds of production drama terms that you'll have to use in order to explain answers in the written exam. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the different drama vocabulary that you're going to have to know in order to understand these questions. But there is a link in the description of this video for a free downloadable poster for you to be able to print out or to use for a revision tool. Okay, so now let's look at a production areas question. This question here says, explain in detail how you would use one of the production areas below to help portray two characters from your drama. Justify your answer. Okay, so we're going to have a look in much more detail here about this question. So let's read it again. It says, explain in detail how you would use one of the production areas below to help portray two characters from your drama. Justify your answer. Right, the very first thing that's really important here is that you have to look at this question. Alright, it might be highlighting things like costume, props, sound, hair and makeup. That's fine. But it says explain in detail how you would use one of these production areas below to help portray the two characters from your drama. Justify your answer. So now that we've looked at this, we're going to have to decide on which sort of element, which production area is best going to suit us to be able to talk about our two characters. Okay, now as I say, you have to have a knowledge of costume, props, sound and hair and makeup vocabulary in order to explain your idea. Now, this is the same system. We know that we've got 4 marks here. That means that you're going to get 2 marks for this bit and you're going to get 2 marks for this, okay? And again, it says explain in detail and then justify. So really what we're doing is, and I do this every time, is we do point, explain, and then justify, okay? Justify. So you're going to turn around and say, the costume of this character, that would be your point, and then you would, if you were going to be picking costume for example, then you would explain what this costume's like, the fabrics, the textures, perhaps what it's trying to communicate, and then you would justify your answer. What are you trying to communicate to the audience through these costume designs? And that would give you your 2 marks for that character. And then you would do exactly the same, point, explain and analyse using the same production area. Okay, but you have to have an understanding of what the different vocabulary that you're being asked to think about here. Now, like I said earlier, you're going to have to think about certain costume terms that you're going to have to use in order to explain and justify the decisions you're making around the costume. You might want to look at things like the period or the style or the age and the personality, the status of the character, the fabrics and the colours that you're thinking about, what the sort of colours might symbolise, the changes in mood and atmosphere. All of these different kinds of things are going to be something that you're going to add in here. Let's now look at an example answer. Jack's costume would help to portray the lower status he has in the drama. Jack will be wearing a standard present-day school uniform. However, the style of this will be very dishevelled and unclean looking. His tie will also not be fully done to show that he has put it on in a rush and perhaps himself. His shoes will be old, run-down trainers. The fabric of his blazer will be all worn, as if it is a hand-me-down. By having Jack dressed like this, the audience will be able to get a sense of the poverty that Jack comes from. They will also get a sense of how he feels out of place and uneasy in his surroundings, as many of the other school pupils will be much smarter dressed. Now, when we look at an answer like this, we can clearly say that what we're doing is making a point. We're explaining our point and we're justifying our answer, and we're using appropriate terminology. We're talking about status, we're talking about the time period, we're talking about the look and the fabric and the texture, and we're also talking about how this is being communicated to the audience. Now it's your turn. Why don't you stop the video here and try that question out and see how you get on? And remember, make a point, explain your point clearly, and justify your answer. So we're now going to look at a much bigger question that is broken into 3 parts. So let's look at this question. Now, this is question 11 of actually the same question paper here. But it says it's broken into 3 parts. It's A, B and C. Now it says state the main theme or issue explored throughout your drama. So first of all, we need to know exactly what the main theme or issue actually is in order for us to be able to answer the second part of this question. Okay, now just to put it really simply, themes and issues just now. Theme is sort of the overarching what is going on in the play. Issues are conflicts that actually arise with the characters. So let's use for example here a second, let's use Romeo and Juliet because we've used it before. So Romeo and Juliet, you could potentially say that a theme here, a main theme might be forbidden love, and an issue might be that 2 people are not allowed to be together because of conflicts with family. So that's the theme and the issue. Alright, so what we want to do is we want to identify, let's say we were going to identify the theme as being forbidden love. If we want to put that down, we'll do that just now. So, forbidden love. Okay, let's say that's what it is. Okay, now in B here it says, with B here it says, think about the main theme and issue identified in A. As a designer, describe the way in which you would use two production skills to highlight this main theme / issue to the audience. Justify your answer. Okay. Now, this here, as you can see across the page here, there's your production skill 1 here, and there's your production skill 2 here, right? So this is asking you to be able to, put down here a production skill 1, and then a production skill 2. Now, with your production areas, you're going to be selecting obviously sound, lighting, set, etc, right? But you have to make sure that you are linking this to the first part of this question, basically whether the theme, all right? You have to use correct theatre terminology in your response, and in order to get your sort of full marks to get 3 marks here, you are looking to be able to give a full description of the way in which you would use this production skill, and you also need to sort of highlight the theme throughout this, and you need to justify your answer and what it is that you're trying to communicate with this theme to the audience, and that's really important. So we're doing the same thing here. We're still using the point, all right, and this would just be a wee bit here, and then we're using explain, right? This would be here. You would be explaining, all right, and then you would justify here, okay, and that's going to give you your 3 marks. Don't be afraid to use a wee bit of this as well if you want to go over, if you want to add a little bit more to it, but that's the balance for it. Now, throughout this, we are when you're describing what's going on and explaining what's going on, you should be using whatever terminology. So if you're using set, we'd be looking for you to talk about cycloramas, flats, window flats, door flats. We want you to talk about where they're positioned on the stage. So that would be areas of the stage, etc. But you have to be linking this back to your theme and the issue that you're writing at the start of this, and that's really important. Then you'd move on to your second production skill, and again you'd be selecting a different one, but you have to make sure that you'd be going back to the theme and the issue, and what it is that you're trying to you're justifying by talking about what you're trying to communicate with themes and issues to the audience, and that's really important that you do that. Let's look at an example answer. I would use lighting to highlight the theme of forbidden love. During the prologue, I would have Romeo standing centre stage right and Juliet standing centre stage left. There would be a profile spotlight above each of them at 100% intensity. There would also be floodlights against the backdrop of Verona. I would also have a Fresnel spotlight positioned over the two families who are both directly behind the children, Romeo and Juliet. The Fresnel will be at 50% intensity and will have red gels in them. By doing this, the audience will be able to be introduced to the two characters and the families, and the lights will help to highlight the tension between these two families and the love Romeo and Juliet have for each other. Now, when we look at this answer, you'll notice that I'm making a point and then I'm explaining what's going on here, and then I'm justifying my decisions for what I'm trying to do to communicate to the audience. I'm also using a variety of lighting terminology to explain this idea. Now, there are a few faults with this answer. For example, I've written there would also be floodlights against the backdrop of Verona, which I didn't really explain why or justify my reasoning behind that. But what you'll notice is I'm writing more than enough in order to get those marks. I've written more than been asked. I'm being clear with my explanation and clear with my justification in order to get those marks in the first place. And I'm using appropriate use of vocabulary. Now, there you have two different questions that are covering production areas. Regardless of what the question is, there are a few top tips that you really need to think about when you're answering these questions. Firstly, you need to understand exactly what the question is asking. You need to make sure that you're using the correct drama terminology within the question. You also have to make sure that you are linking back to what the question is asking you at all times. And you need to make it clear what you're trying to communicate to the audience, because this is always about the audience. So just to go back over that, understanding the question, using correct terminology, linking back to the question, and making sure you're talking about audience communication. So now it's over to you. Try the last question and see how you got on. And go and back over the papers and have a look at a variety of the different production area questions and see if you can answer them. Thank you for watching this video, and please click a like and subscribe.